No, I'm gonna keep this in here just this way it
Yeah.
makes a whole lot more sense. This way the transition's a little bit smoother. Uh, so welcome everyone to the explanation video as to the rules and regulations for Valve's homebrew list, as well as the telling of the story thus far. My name is Panzerlad42, obviously. I'm joined by my friend Iskar Kush. Uh, Today we have a physical display. Well, physical as in game, but we have a display of different models and the way everything's set up for tabletop sim. So this way you can have an actual representation of what's going on. Uh, but first and foremost, we're going to do the story thus far. So this way it is all made very clear. There will be a bit of flip flopping in between different things. Do we want to show the character races or
Uh, yeah, might as well. Because then
okay?
some people probably realize where it's all linked to. Just, shits and giggles. Some people are going to get a kick out of it.
Yep. All right. Well, if that's the case, let me go to the story thus far and scroll up a ways.
Yeah, you gotta go to the very top. That's gonna need to be there so people know what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
I'll put it there.
All right.
Okay. So I take it you're ready for me to start this whole inner workings of this story?
Pretty much. So I have the story itself pulled up on my phone.
Okay. I've got it on my computer too, so. So, to start this all off, this happens about 1,000 years after the Great Rift happened. So this is like once the Great Rift tear had appeared and Robert Tillman woken up, initiated the Primaris doctrine.
Hold on. Do we want to go even further back to the?
Oh, further back for the storylines of the Iron Hand 16th clan, and as well as the 34th company of the Salamanders, known as the Chasarella Drakes.
May as well. I mean, get it all put in.
Yeah, might as well.
All right. Well, since I have most of that written down as it stands, I guess I will start with that.
Sounds good. While you do that, I can get a couple more things here loaded in.
Yes. Yes. So the as a short aside, the 16th Iron Hands Clan Company and the 34th Company of the Salamanders are both legion-sized companies that tie their origins back to before the Horus Heresy that happened at the beginning of the not the beginning, it just happened in the 30th millennium. Um, so, as far as the story goes for the Iron Hands, they were initially a subgroup of the original 16th Clan Company and were attached to the 2412th Expeditionary Fleet. And that fleet was launched sometime before sometime just before the beginning of the Horus Heresy. When the events of the Isfahan 5 drop site massacre happened, half the fleet returned to the Medusan system in order to help reinforce it and continue on the fight against Horus, leaving the rest of the fleet with its Imperial Armada contingent to return sometime later, as it was imperative that they press on for another month to find if anything was worth taking. Keep in mind, this expeditionary fleet was in the process of doing a deep space exploration into uncharted sectors of the galaxy. Upon discovery of this, Clan Vorgan, the original parent clan company, disowned the Force, claiming that they were no longer true sons of the Medusan. Even so, the disowned section had to continue its expedition, now being clanless and nameless. Once it was found that there wasn't anything worth exploring or any worlds worth taking, the fleet turned around and made a warp jump, intending to head back to Medusa to be with the rest of the chapter and help snuff out the scourge that was the traitor forces. During the trip back, however, it seemed that the fleet became lost in the warp. Over time, the Imperial Armada contingent slowly diminished as their ships kept disappearing. It was decided to leave the warp and figure out where in the stars they were. As fate would have it, they would exit the warp near Mars, only the Iron Hands vessels seeming to make the translation through. Nearby, the 34th Company of Salamanders Legions reappeared from the warp in the Retribution-class battleship Nolandia, which went missing, or which had been classified as missing. Both ships decided to dock on Mars and figure out what time had passed and what exactly had happened. While there, the Prime Hermeticon Caprix demanded the ships from both fleets, to which both parties said no. Both companies, through the next 6 years, were refit and resupplied, all while both companies worked together to train and maintain efficiency. During that time, they were informed of the events that had happened during the Horus Heresy and of the events since. The clan went through many name changes, as many were suggested since their parent clan no longer existed, even though the entirety of the clan decided to reforge the name of the 16th into one that they themselves would own. This did not disrupt any of the current clans, as they had all changed over the millennium that had passed. The 16th went through a process of selection to find out who amongst the command should go through the process to become Primaris. The rest of the company had a good old-fashioned brawl, and the top 1,001 would be selected and would go through assessment and trials as to what their roles would become. This being the time in which Bellis Cowell had started the Primaris initiative. While this happened, Captain Aramis, de facto captain of the nameless clan company, or the newly named 16th Clan Company, contacted the Iron Council to both find out what had happened to his clan and gain new orders. Well, I've got to change that a little bit. What had happened to gain new orders as to what to do from there. The council, being unsure what to do with the 4,000 Marines, decided to give Tech Marine Teleek the honorary title of Iron Father for the time being, seeing as he was the only Master of the Forge that the company had, and as such was promoted to Warlord. This would suit the company just fine, as Teleek had been well liked by all. Teleek went through the process to become Warlord of the company, as well as Iron Father, and would soon become up to date with everything. He still would not change his mind about keeping the fleet, and would mark it as his personal clan fleet. As such, the company became his, and the 16th was reinstated in the clan, though albeit secretly to avoid an earful from Gilliman. Fortune would smile upon the Salamanders and Iron Hands as he was away and would be busy, so they were able to breathe easy for a time. All of the ships were moored at the ports around Mars, being worked upon and repaired from the extensive travel. Machines of war and supplies were unloaded as everyone was refit and rearmored. Some units, like the Gorgon Terminator squads and the Medusan Immortal squads, remained as they were, unable to receive anything new for refit. The rest of the Marines traded in their Mark V armor and repainted it to fit their clan and legion colors. During this time, the Great Rift appeared, causing much concern for the two companies on planet. As it was only three ships, named the Iron Lance, Iron's Venom, and Iron's Bite, had been fully repaired, while the rest had still been continued to be worked upon. To clarify as to what these ships were, the Iron Lance was a Hoplon assault cruiser, while Iron's Venom and Iron's Bite were two Venom destroyers. During the first year of the 42nd millennium, on the thought dead world of Badab 2 or Primaris, there, in the Badab sector on Badab Primaris, I believe, there was still a few hive cities that existed, being in vast disrepair. However, the imperial populace there had managed to get a message out warning of the Necron Skorpek Locust dynasty, which had recently awoken and made its way out and onto the surface. There had been reports of few skirmishes with the makeshift PDF had been carried out, and the Astra Militarum contingent was being formed in order to try and snuff out the Necrons. Let me restart that entire sentence. There had been reports of a few skirmishes with the Necrons had with the local PDF, and an Astra Militarum contingent was being formed in order to try and snuff out the Necrons before they became too active. In the following months, it became very apparent that the Imperial Guard regiments sent would not be enough. Teleek met with the commanding staff of the Nolandia, and an agreement was made as Teleek would take his 3 ships as well as a contingent from each of the forces present. They soon made headway to the Badab system, being reinforced by an Imperial Navy fleet that was transporting fresh troops to the planet as well as supplies. Both fleets grouped together to make the Badab Relief Task Force. It was decided that the rest of the troops from both companies would join this task force once repairs and rearming of ships was complete. The expected time was sometime in the next few years, though, due to the age of the ships and the amount of repair and, more importantly, rearmament needed to happen. Upon arrival to the Badab sector, Teleek moved his ships into position in orbit above the planet of Badab 2. He decided to come down himself with a small contingent of troops to help him. He came down in the ruins of the hive city known as Flaxglow. After a great many fights, the Iron Hands were pulled out of the Badab sector to be properly evaluated, and its troops disseminated throughout the rest of the chapter and its subsequent successor chapters. The group adamantly refused this, choosing to stay as they were, though very little of the reasoning, as they thought very little of the reasoning behind the rules of the Codex Astartes that had been pushed out by the Ultramarines Primarch Rabute Guilliman. As such, there was a rift that was caused between the 16th and the rest of the chapter. Due to this, the 16th was investigated heavily by the Inquisition, which quickly learned of the 16th's history and brought it to the attention of the recently awakened Guilliman. He personally came to the 16th to speak with Teleek, who had been designated Iron Father, and as such would be the voice of the clan. There had been a quarrel between the two, Teleek knowing he would not be able to hold his own against the Primarch, but staunchly defying the Primarch, as no one but the God Emperor himself or the Gorgon could command him to conform. As such, Guilliman was turned away, and from then on, being seen as someone who was very much an outsider to the 16th and an intruder. No harm would befall the Primarch, as there was still much respect for the Primarch. You don't pick a fight with someone who can very easily kill you. This only proved to show that there was still loyalty, as well as the extensive questioning and investigation of the 16th by both the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Inquisition. It would not be until 1,000 years later that the Iron Hands would welcome their brothers back and upgrade the war fleet that had been bringing them much in the way of reputation from the constant fighting that the 16th would be involved in. Nearly to the day, the 16th would be reinstated by the clan and given its new name by Teleek, who dubbed them the Tempered Iron, forming a new clan insignia as well. And that is the history up until the beginning of the homebrew Crusade. From the Iron Hand's perspective, Val will be more than happy, I imagine, to give the perspective of the 34th Chasarella Drakes.
And unfortunately, there's not much going for them because I haven't been able to really play them out to give them my history. The only history I've got is based on the same time frame. He basically showed up from the warp with the Retributor class battleship, the Nolandia. The Chasarella Drakes were only a single force on the Nolandia, accompanied by the Draconian Guard, which is a Imperial Guard force that I don't even know how much yet. And on top of it, they also had a Draconian Knight House of Imperial Knights with them on this ship. Afterwards, when they came out of the warp and gone through the indoctrination, the Salamanders of the 34th, Iskar Valkush, took on the Rubicon process, being upgraded further to show loyalty and, to prove that he was still loyal and not tainted, and thus becoming more pure. Now, mind you, most of his brothers had also followed him. Not all of them have succeeded going through the process. Some of them died. There are still some that kept their old ways, but they all followed the Promethean cult route that Vulcan Heastan had put in place for the Salamanders. So they were still Legion size as much as the Iron Hand 16th Company. Mind you, they only had a single ship.
As a little tidbit, the Iron Hands had an entire fleet with them.
Yes. One ship versus a fleet. And yet, the Retributor class battleship was fairly big. And from their own records, the ship got a little bit bigger than what it perceived to be, all because of the warp. How? No one knows. It's the warp. Anything happens. From that point, the Salamanders had been assisting the 16th clan with engagements throughout their history, as well as doing their own agendas. They have also rekindled their ties with this, slowly rekindled their ties with the Salamanders core companies that were still active, what that remained. But they were still kept as the 34th Company of the Salamanders, known as the Chasarella Drakes, which we will go into the story later because it's marked in there. Recently, how many years after the Rift opened, we've got engagement with the Tyranids, you say? There was no date on it, was there? Don't worry, I'm also going to look into.
Well, no, I can give you, based off of some of the information that we have available to us, I can give you a roundabout answer. So, the engagement that he is referring to is the Alchor system section that, if anybody else has been following along in the past, we have multiple games upon. Which this is the little bit of RP that has happened. So, warp storms kept most people from touching, or planet Elshore 7 of the Elshore system, a world lush in plant and animal life. At first glance, civilization has never touched this green jewel, but deep below the surface, a darkness stirs. Warp storms have kept most people from touching this world, but the fall of Cadia has caused immense shifts in the galactic map, and now the Imperium's eyes have made their way to it. Some wish to harvest its untapped mineral wealth, while others see a paradise they can claim for their own personal use, while more still see a planet they can grow populations in the billions on to throw into the meat grinder of war. Yet the Imperium isn't the only force interested in this place. Other factions seek to either preserve, consume, settle, or destroy it, each for goals directly in conflict with others, each with enough resources to cause a war that would set the system ablaze. Only one can stand victorious over this soon-to-be battlefield. There are a number of other entries into the roleplay, myself and Val's as well, but we can do something for that later. Because this happened after the fall of Cadia and the Great, which caused the direct correlation to the Great Rift, I would say that the conflict with the Tyranids happened not long after the Great Rift opened.
Okay, but it would have to be after the Babylon system that we did with the Necrons.
Was that before or after the Great Rift?
That was after the Great Rift as well.
Was it? Yes, that's right.
Yes.
The Great Rift was the pathway out.
Yes.
Okay, so I would say that this happened some decades after.
So 100 years.
Fuck it, sure, why not?
Or a decade. That's like 10 or something like that, right?
Yeah, a decade is 10 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah. The pulling of everything, especially for the time frame, because while technically Space Marines enjoy an immortality until death, yeah. So, that is there. Oh my god.
So there's still a lot of work in progress on my Salamanders. It's just they have not seen much battles.
They've been doing a lot more on the back end, whereas the Iron Hands have been doing a lot of stuff on the front end.
Once I get a chance to play my company, God forbid anybody to face them.
God forbid anybody to face the two of us together.
Oh God. As it is right now, he's got the Salamanders, a section of my Salamanders in that game set up. So I get to play a little. Not a lot, just a little. But we're getting off track. So to the story thus far.
Yes. So yes, I also want to say, yes, I do understand my screen has just been showing my logo. For anybody that wants to say anything about it, there is a reason for that, and it's that there's a lot of moving parts happening on screen, and you know, I don't want to spoil anything before we get to it.
Yeah, this is more of show and tell, and hey, here's a story for you guys to follow us.
Yes. So, beginning with the story thus far. Would you like to start as well, since
it has been over 1,000 years since the two Legion-sized companies of Space Marines have made their way back to the Imperium space around Mars after the Rift had happened. The 34th Company of the Salamanders, now calling themselves the Chasarella Drakes, and the 16th Clan of the Iron Hands had been fighting side by side for most of that time, alongside other Imperium forces and groups, especially with the Inquisition. The 16th Clan was working with an Inquisition battle force when they had gotten a message to meet up with the council of individuals located at a major space station. They had to get there as soon as possible, for this message would take vital importance. This was signed by the First Clan's chaplain of the Iron Hands and the Inquisition High Commander. Also in the message, it stated to bring the entirety of the 16th clan to the station. The 16th clan Forge Father Teleek had called out to all his clan brothers and assisting forces working with the clan to meet up at the coordinates and await for pending orders. Teleek and his battle group was the last to make it to the station, where his clan and assisting forces were waiting for him. The battle groups that had gotten there ahead of time had been refilled and restocked with weapons and goods. For what none had been told, for they will be briefed on the subject later. About a month later of being stationed on the space station, a few of Teleek's ships had been upgraded and also fitted with some additional equipment. It had the Imperial Seagull crest on the request for these upgrades and refit jobs. At this time, there has also been a few other ships docking at the station. Seemed like things were starting to pick up around the station, that it seemed like. A few days later, Teleek was requested by the council members that requested his presence, and thus was escorted to the room by a servitor leading the way. Once there, the door opened into a room with figureheads representing the council members awaiting for him. From Teleek's left, after he entered the room, the Iron Hands first clan chaplain, Roar Waylair, a tech priest, Dominus Hike Oligama, Inquisitor Vervaz Dice, Adeptus Sororitas High Priestess Emiliana Ionella, and lastly, from the Salamanders chapter, First Company of the Fire Drakes, Vulcan Heaston. After entering the room, the door closing behind you, leaving you, the members, in silence. After a brief moment, the Inquisitor speaks. Forge Father Teleek of the 16th clan. Do you know where? Do you know of the 34th Company of the Salamanders, known as the Chasarella Drakes?
Teleek's response sounds something like this. So, I know Val could not hear that. I apologize for anybody. There should have been a little bit of a warning beforehand. That was the sound of an old fax machine, because that's what Technolingua sounds like. So, let me go to a binary translator and grab all of this. This way I can speak in English what that just meant.
I don't even have a clue what it means yet.
Yes, you do. I've told you what it meant.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Never mind, I see it.
Oh wait, didn't I have to re-explain it to you anyways?
Yep. So basically what happened is Teleek said something, and then stood there silently looking at the first chaplain.
Yes. So Teleek spoke this string of binary at the first both at the Inquisitor and at the first Iron Hands clan chaplain. What was being said,
we'll get to shortly,
was, "Are you an imbecile, Inquisitor? What is this about, Captain?"
Okay. The Inquisitor looks at Tarek with some uneasiness with his response. Also, most of the council also look towards the chaplain that is there for translation. While they are doing so, the chaplain lets out a sigh and looks to Tarek. Brother Tarek, could you translate that in words that we all can understand? For even I can't decipher your binary code. For each clan has a different set of codes that they go by.
Tarek simply sighs and looks at the Inquisitor. Yes, I know the 34th very well. They're the only other members in the Imperium that are always welcome on board my ship. What has happened to them?
With the response that each member is able to know and comprehend, with that, the Inquisition speaks up again. Well, Tarek, I was hoping maybe you might have some insight on this matter. I was going to ask you a few, and just before he was able to finish his sentence, he got cut off. From Vulcan himself, Inquisitor, he may not know nothing of it, for they were tasked but what seemed to be a message from Robert Gilliman, the chaplain of the fire. Captain, Forge Father of the Fire Drakes the chaplain of the Fire Drakes had sent a message to Robert if he had sent out a order or a message of that magnitude. Sorry, I'm getting my sentence. It's been a while since I've looked at this. By that time, the Chasarella Drakes had sent out us the coordinates and info on their current location before they dared move and engage their warp drives. We have even asked the first clan to look at the message for any discrepancies, for the Tech Marines of the Iron Hands are well versed with finding out whether a message was faulty. This was all said by Vulcan. Next up, the High Priestess also adds in, they're not the only ones that are missing, though Vulcan. Vulcan nods to what she had mentioned, and she then speaks a bit more. The Sisters of the Draconian Order of the Salamanders and the Drakes are also with the Chasarella Drakes, as well as their Draconian Knights and Guards. For a little bit of insight, the Draconian Order of the Salamander and the Drakes are two different groups of Adeptus Sororitas that were brought on board Nolandia to accompany the Chasarella Drakes and the Guard. The Tech Priest also points one more thing, as mostly everyone is putting their concerns out in the open. Not to mention, but also the Retributor class battleship Nolandia, that was well upgraded once she and the crew, along with the 16th clan, came back to us from the war. She has been also refitted again back over 200 years ago, going over an overhaul of new tech and equipment. Even equipment for indoctrinating people to become Marines or even Primaris, where they have preferred to be on the move more than having a world to recruit from regularly.
Tarek holds his hand up, the Sovo arm attached to his back, clanging together as the pincers slam, demanding everyone's attention.
With a sudden noise from within the room, everyone looks over at Tarek.
Tarek looks at the Inquisitor, having removed his helmet, and simply asks, Robert's message. Now. The plasma cutter flickering on and off in a steady whine the entire time.
Vulcan laughs out loud to Tarek's request and speaks up. Tarek, I have a request. Well, maybe a favor more so. If I give the message to you, will you do us the honor of finding out what has become of the Chasarella Drakes and the Draconian battle group that's with them? If so, I shall be thankful and look forward to seeing my battle brothers again, for they may find some answers to our problems here. Also intrigued is the chaplain. Well, if Vulcan is asking, then let me add this to the request he is offering. Brother Terry, if you so upon deem to take Vulcan up on this, I shall of course also request that once you find the Chasarella Drakes, make sure the machine spirit is well and still blessed, not just by the Chasarella Drakes, but also by the 16th clan. Vulcan nods to Roar's request for the additional blessing of the Messiah from the assistance of the 16th clan. So, Teleek, what say you? As Vulcan asks.
Are you not coming with, Vulcan? Teleek asks, not taking his eyes off the Inquisitor, who has yet to rise from his chair.
Vulcan responds, was as such. As much as I like to, Teleek, but I must help my brothers ready for a battle to come in the next month. So you will be on your own on this task. But I will give you a message to give to Iskar Balkush once you meet up with him. Yes, it's me. One big blooper, it's me. With that, Vulcan stands and walks towards, but not to Teleek's front, but off to his side. Here is the message, Teleek. As he continues past Teleek, Roar speaks up just before Vulcan is about to leave to have the door activated. Wow. I, Chaplain Roar of the First Clan, hereby the Chapter Master of the Iron Hands, make the 16th Clan official to the Iron Hands as a company, but also maintaining their Legion status. With that, Vulcan also states, I also announce the Chasarella Drakes as an official company of the Salamanders and Legion status. I also announce that the 16th Clan and the Chasarella Drakes as a combined Astartes battle group that the Salamanders shall always assist whenever in need. Chaplain Roar also nods to this announcement and says, Teleek, give your clan a name to be marked down so that it may be engraved into the archives. Just as soon as Vulcan leaves, the Inquisitor stands and also speaks. Teleek, with that said, I do hope you take on this task. You are dismissed. A moment later, a message pops up into Teleek's visor stating to listen to the message if he so chooses in isolation.
Teleek looks at the message after it had been moved from his helmet visor to his bionic eye, and the servo claw lunges forward, grabbing the Inquisitor by the head, and the second one grabbing him by his torso. The arms rapidly dragging him to Teleek as he whispers just loud enough for everyone to hear if they want to. The next time you make me wait a month for this level of intelligence, I will be more than happy to oversee your making of an Iron Hand and the attachment process by which we Iron Hands go through. Am I understood, Inquisitor? After this warning, Teleek puts on his helmet, and even though he's wearing it, there is no mistaking the cold smile being worn underneath it. Afterwards, the sober arms return him to his chair, and Teleek makes eye contact with every member of the council and proceeds to leave, punching into the station's comm systems and saying, Members of the 16th and those who have been attached, make ready to slip the moors and be ready for the hunt. The sounds of Marines and humans alike shouting and stomping in excitement and the hums of engines fill the station, echoing to the very core. Tarek walks down the corridor and shuts out the noise from the outside, the machine spirit in his suit helping to magnify the sound of machinery working, as it always seemed to calm the Iron Father. He knew that his decision towards the Inquisitor would not carry favor, but he had thought about it before the events had happened. As he walked, his personal guard of Gorgon Terminators and Murloc Terminators fell in step behind him. It was a sight more rare than seeing a Primarch for most of the Marines and crew members who were fresh. The Terminators followed silently, knowing that the next several days would be very hectic for their master and even more so for the fleet. Tarek's visor flashed a number of reports from the quartermaster of his war fleet, as well as from the accompanied 227th Cadian Regiment that had been attached to his fleet and served as a constant reminder of humanity's strength to endure and thrive even in the most hellish of fights. He looked over the reports with a practiced ease, dispatching requests and forms to both the station crew and to the Adeptus Munistorum for fulfillment. He opened his Vox channel to his senior lieutenant, Wojtek, and said, "Lieutenant, tell 1st Recon to muster and ready themselves. I will be using their skills when we make planetfall, and tell pilots to make ready for any environment." He listened as his lieutenant acknowledged his transmission, and then he shut down the Vox, continuing to walk towards his ship. He muttered to himself as to how to name the previously unnamed 16th Clan Company. Through all their trial, from the damnable fighting in the Badab sector to their more recent fights, they had seen almost all of it through relatively decently. Even the guard, so long as the Iron Hands hadn't broken, they most certainly would not. He pondered and asked himself aloud, "Clan Teleek?" He continued to walk, thinking and liking the name more and more, coming up with a continuation of it. "We will be known as the Tempered Iron." He continued to walk, finally looking at the message Rabute Gilliman had sent for him and his closest friend, who had dueled on a number of occasions.
With the station in an uproar of tech priests from the AdMech, and men and women alike moving crates of goods and supplies around to the 16th Clan ship's quartermasters, for they are gearing up to move out again. But with their surprise, they do not even know, not even the clan has any idea where they are going, either other than to find a brother and a legion that is lost out there somewhere. Once Tarek was ready to listen to the message, whether he heeded the message on his visor after he had been given the message from Vulcan to listen to it in isolation. Iskar Valkash of the 34th Company, you are being tasked to head to a cluster of stars to see if the men and women are still part of the Imperium. You are to also assist them with whatever problems that they are having, and to bring them under the watchful eye of the God Emperor. Whatever Xenos or heretics are out there causing troubles or problems, we must assist them. I leave this matter to you. After the Vox message ended, it also gave Tarek the coordinates of where the Chasarella Drakes were supposed to end up. This was located in the outer rim of their current system. But the Chasarella Drakes never reached it. Also attached to it was the exact coordinates of where they had made the jump, with the exact heading and positioning within space. It almost seemed that someone had seen them make the jump, or maybe, just maybe, Iskard had left info just in case something might have gone wrong, for hopes that they might find an answer to all this.
Tarek sighed to himself and boarded the Gloriana-class battleship Fist of Iron, of which he had gone through decades of deliberation and trials to obtain from Clan Harmech. and even more so the entire chapter, to relinquish to him for his use. Taking the coordinates and information relevant to the shipmaster and had broadcast it to the fleet, so there was now some clarity. He also broadcast the mission details to his lieutenants to be dispersed amongst the troops, and brought in members from the support units that he had spent so much time with to inform them as well.
With all the supplies being routed and moved to the ships of the 16th Clan, they were now ready after a day or two of getting things moved, for they do not know how long this will be. Once Teleek and his clan was ready to depart, they had left for the designated point to where the Chasarella Drakes had made their jump. Also, the clan may have stopped at a few other places picking up more supplies and or personnel for the trip. Once they got there, they noticed how close to the rift they were into where the Chasarella Drakes were, to the very dot. The area space was empty. No planets. No ships. No debris of any sort or thing. The air was cold and eerie, but not for the clan, for they were fearless.
During the time of moving to the exact location, the war fleet that had been put together consisted of the 16th Iron Hands clan fleet, made up of the Gloriana-class battleship Fist of Iron, 2 battle barges named Gorgon's Remembrance and Ironed Claw, 1 Dominus-class Grand Cruiser named Iron's Dominance, 2 Idrati-class heavy cruisers named Will of Iron and Iron Hammer, 6 strike cruisers named Forge's Heat, Forged Iron, Vengeance's Bite, Anvil of Iron, Anvil's Frame, and Talon of Iron, 2 Hoplon assault cruisers named the Sword of Iron and Iron Lance, 5 Venom destroyers, 7 Nova-class frigates, and 9 Gladius-class frigates. Total active Marines on board those ships number 6,000. They had also been joined by the 428th, 29th, and 430th Cadian regiments, consisting of the Emperor-class battleship Cadia's Stand, 2 Victory-class battleships, Cadia's Will and the Unbroken, 3 Exorcist-class Grand Cruisers, 2 Avenger-class Grand Cruisers, 6 Overlord-class battle cruisers, 10 Lunar-class cruisers, 4 Dictator-class cruisers, 5 Dictators. Sorry, we did a little bit. 12 Dauntless-class light cruisers, 15 Widowmaker-class Cobra-class destroyers, 20 Firestorm-class frigates, and 10 Sword-class frigates, as well as 40 fuel and supply transports, 30 equipment transports for vehicles, and 20 troop transports. Upon arrival to the area, the message for all ships to make ready is sent across the fleet, as fighters were sent out in a search pattern for 2 days to ensure that no wreckage or probes were left behind.
After the 2 days of fighters doing their search patterns, nothing was found. Everyone is geared and ready for the final call from Teleek to make the jump.
This is Iron Father Teleek to the 16th Fleet. Jump away. Teleek stood on the command deck, watching the sensors and readings of the ship's equipment, knowing that the entirety of the 16th and her support elements were jumping into the unknown, and even more so were jumping ready to fight. He had made sure to leave a probe behind to relay the mission and the jump passageway behind, just in case more forces were going to follow. But as he had set the decryption code to that of the Iron Hand's capacities only, so that it would force the chapter and the wider Imperium to acknowledge something was going on. He also felt something that he hadn't felt since before the heresy, an unbridled excitement. He had served with the expeditionary fleet, and it felt like times of old again. And he knew that many of his Marines felt the same.
As the Tempered Iron Clan made their jump into the warp to find out what happened to the Chasarella Drakes and returned back with them. As soon as they enter the warp is when everything has gone wrong. The jump was fine, but all the instruments had gone haywire as the machine spirit is scrambled to restore itself as they keep going. It was only minutes later when they have entered. It was only minutes when they have entered the warp. They left the warp, but not to where the message had encoded for.
All ships stand ready for anything. Teleek sounded across the fleet as he turned to look at the crew. He looked at the captain and said, "Captain, get us a threat assessment and someone get the machine spirit back in order. I want combat teams ready."
Vox was active. All ships had reported the same problems. But as soon as the ship exited the warp, everything had gone back to normal as if nothing happened. The ships were all green as each one had reported in, and the Marines and Guardsmen all got in battle ready for anything that may come at them.
I want a copy of those readings and get the auspex up. Navigator, find out where we are and stand down combat teams to rotation alpha, Teleek ordered as he surveyed the emptiness of the void.
As Teleek and the rest of the Tempered Iron scanners kicked into high gear, coming up scanners is a blue giant star that is... Give me a minute because I had to alter these. Blue star that is 4.9 million kilometers in diameters. Crap, where am I? There it is. Give me a second, people.
For those of you that were listening, I have just put up an image on the screen that is showing the imagery of the star, and I will pull up images for the rest of the system as well.
So yeah, the coming up on the scanners is a blue giant star that is over 4.9 million kilometers in diameter and size, with planets within the system you have jumped into. The first planet to the star is roughly 4,100 kilometers in size, and it reads to be a sulfur volcanic planet. The second is over 40,000 kilometers in size, that reads as a rocky desert planet with a 3K size. Did I leave it at that, or did I change it?
No,
Yep.
you let the moon alone.
Yeah. With a 3K, with roughly a 3,000 kilometers size rocky metallic moon. Also around the main planet, there is some asteroids surrounding it. The third set is a 50,000 kilometer sized planet with readings of a rocky metallic planet. And it also has a moon that is 4,000 roughly in kilometers in size and reads to be a rocky ice moon. Around the main planet, there is also some asteroids around it. The fourth planet is a continental planet, roughly 40,000 kilometers. Fifth seems to be like an asteroid field in space. Sixth follows along the same linear path that lingers in space is another asteroid field. The seventh is a large planet spanning 180,000 kilometers in size. Is that right? Yep.
Yeah, 180,000 kilometers.
Roughly 180,000 kilometers in size, and is a brown dwarf planet. The last planet in the system is a frozen gas giant, spanning 110,000 kilometers in size. There is also some asteroids around this gas giant.
Alright, turning the imagery back off. Any Imperial signals being received, Signal Officer? Teleek asked, thinking on how best to deploy the fleet, motioning to the comms deck to have a limited number of fighters be sent out in a patrol pattern from the fleet to form a picket.
As a Signal Officer, to see if there are any Imperial signals, he is then returned with an answer. No, Brother Teleek. There is none in this system. Just after the Signal Officer finished that statement and just about to say something else, the engine room signals to the command deck. Captain, we are very low in fuel somehow. It seems that the warp or something had used up almost all the fuel we had. We will have to find some means to get fuel for the ship to jump out of the system. Just after that report, the Signal Officer adds more to his own report. Captain, I'm getting the same report from all ships, that their fuel is almost depleted as well as I'm picking up 2 radio chargers in the system that we are currently in. To add more to this, the Auspex scanners also hums in showing that there is 5 space stations, one near the sulfur volcanic, the continental planets in the system, with small size ships that are no bigger than the escort class ships within the civilian ships on either side. There also is a few other stations located at the large brown dwarf planet and the rocky metallic planet with its rocky ice moon.
Signal to the fleet to make towards the nearest planet, Signal Officer. Try and make radio contact with the ships and the stations that are located there, and have the fleet deploy half the fighters. Have the assault ships warm the engines, but don't load the troops, and have 3 Widowmaker destroyers from the Cadians proceed towards the station, but make it seem peaceful until weapons are needed. Teleek ordered, listening to the radio traffic. Navigator, were you able to place where we are? Teleek asked calmly, looking towards the array of personnel trying to reference charts and maps.
As Teleek put out the request to his officers and staff to get any info on such stuff, Navigator's going through all records and logs to see if there is anything close to what they have on their scanners. For a system that has been seen like this, he looks back at Teleek and responds, Captain, there is no records of the system or planets in our records or logs, not even in the Imperium's records. 3 Widowmaker destroyers take point approaching the frozen gas giant planet, and what seems to be a station there. And there also seems to be blimps jumping in to your front between you and the station. A small escort fleet of about 5 ships. There are also other blimps also jumping out and away from the area. It seems you have not gone unnoticed in the system. The signal officer is trying to hail them, but is only getting chitter-chatter response from the ships. He then spoke up to those on the command deck. I'm not getting any reasonable response from these ships. It's all chitter-chatter, as he then put the dialogue on speakers for those to hear in the command deck. At the same time, a message comes from one of the Widowmakers taking point. We might have a problem. These do not look like normal type of ships we are used to fighting or seeing.
Keep your distance and give me a visual, Teleek ordered as he listened, trying to figure out what the language they were hearing.
As he requested, he gets a visual of both the station and the 5 escort ships that are near the frozen gas giant. These do not look normal, but they do seem somewhat organic in nature. But the scans are picking up metallic ratings on both the ships and the stations. They just look organic. So if he's got the picture up, the one on the top is the station. The one on the bottom is his escort style class ship. For those that are referencing and following.
Yep.
Not a few minutes later, the ships had moved into a pattern like X. They had engaged their engines, closed the gap to the Widowmakers.
Be wary in case those are Necron ships in disguise. Set up the fleet to full alert and replace the Widowmakers with 5 Firestorm frigates and have the fighters go with the Firestorms. Deploy a 6th of the assault craft from the Navy, keep the Iron Hands ready, and in the void, but not in the fight just yet. Teleek ordered, looking at the crew. Systems officer, are there any planets in the system in which we can use as a fuel source for the fleet? Teleek then looks at the captain of the vessel. What is the current date as well, Captain? Signal officer, are there any probes in the area currently that are being pinged as Imperial transponders?
As the orders come, the ships scramble to adjust formations. The 5 escorts did not stall or slow down. Systems officer was already underway trying to find a way to get some fuel source. At his demise, it was not hard to find it, but he was unsure if it will work for it's not the same source they are used to. Captain, I believe I did found a fuel source, but am unsure if it is compatible with our engines. Although there is a station near the planet with movement. It's near the brown dwarf planet. In response to one question, current date unknown from the sector, but our date also unknown. The warp is not accurate when you do the jumps. No Imperial probes or transporters, but I'm getting multiple more signals coming into the air, Captain. At least another 5 to 10 more, and fast approaching.
Have the Firestorms put out warning shots and add in 4 Dauntless cruisers and 2 Lunars. Have the Sword on standby for a line breaker tactic and have the fighters launch. I want bombers out after, station them next to the Lunars. Bring the combat teams to full ready and have the transports fall back and be guarded. We can't afford to lose them this early. Teleek ordered in a calm tone, making sure his orders were understood as he walked over to the systems officer. Pull up the readings for me. I will see if we can use the possible fuel sources.
Here's the readings. As it pulls up its definition and classification, it's called Caslon. It is a common gas that is a universal reactor fuel. It is found on gas giant worlds. With the planet being so big, you would think it was a gas giant, but it does not look like, unless someone found a way to mine it from the planet, as the system officer puts his word out there. Ships mobilized and moved into position to receive the newly added 8 more escort ships of the same type and make also forming up on the current 5 that were already there and closing in fast. With the warning shots being fired, the group of 8 maneuvered almost like each were linked in such a way to reform back immediately. The group were warming up their weapons, but also at the same time, the first 5 had launched torpedoes at the firestorms in hopes to hit them or to see what they do. They did not steer their course, but maintained it.
Fighters, destroy those torpedoes, warm the lances, and strip them of their courage. Try not to destroy them, Teleek ordered, returning his gaze to the screen, curious as to the prospects that could be explored with the mining. When the assault ships attack, if there is need for it, I want prisoners alive. Use whatever means necessary, Teleek informed the signal officer.
All hands were in motion as orders came out. Fighters let loose on getting those torpedoes. With ease, all torpedoes were destroyed. Ships closed, the other 4 new ships launched their torpedoes, and now laser weapons were being fired, for they got within close range. Ships were now in a dogfight along with the fighters. Also during this time, 2 new signals came up on the Auspex scanners. Captain, I got 2 new signals, moving in fast. To the same size as these, but they seem different.
Have the swords flank around and maintain readiness. Tell the assault boats to board. I want the 2 Avengers up front and ready, Teleek ordered, maintaining his calmness, having pulled up a holo map that was following the events of the battle.
As things progressed, the 8 ships were taking hits, but also absorbing it with some shields and armor plating. They were not slow, but also not very agile either. Some of the Teleek ships were able to get in behind to get shots off. The engines to mobilize one of the use as an assault to board it, although it was tricky to stay on one from the engines, or one would maneuver into position to engage a ship that was hitting it or get its attention. Some of the Teleek ships were also taking hits, but it seemed to be something that can be mended easily. Also at the same time, 2 new signals came into view. They seemed to be of human designs. They did not enter the fray, but instead stayed put. But also, their shields and weapons are powered and ready. As soon as they had entered, it seemed that at least another 5 more ships were also jumping into the area. Same origin of the first group.
Open a channel to the human-designed ships, Teleek ordered to the signal officer. Let us see who these newcomers are.
With the battle raging on, seems like the newcomers received. Hello there, stranger. You seem to be doing well enough. If you don't need any help or not wanting the scrap from these ships that you're fighting, we'd be glad to take them off your hands once you're done with them. It's the voice of someone that actually speaks human was comforting. Once the hail had been received, the officer had put him onto speakers so the command deck could hear, especially Teleek.
This is Iron Father Teleek of the Iron Hand Space Marine chapter. Who are you, and what are we currently fighting? Teleek said calmly, as if he were speaking to someone who was standing in front of him.
After Teleek had responded, the 5 ships jumped into the area, but their target was not his ships. It were the 2 human design ships that had appeared. Iron Father Teleek. We'll have to speak later. Looks like these insectoids insist on killing us. With that, the ships had severed its channel for the time being to turn their ships to engage the 5 ships. Although they had taken a different pattern. Instead of the X formation we saw, they had taken up a scattered formation. The 2 ships took up a line formation to cut through and weave in and out of theirs.
Half of the swords finished the fight that they are currently involved in, and the others moved to assist the 2 that are now engaged. I want one of the Avengers to go assist as well. Forget prisoners, I want this fight ended. Send the bombers in. and pull the assault boats out. Launch all Iron Hands fighter and bomber wings. Teleek ordered and turned his attention to the humans' fight, watching the aggressors' tactics.
As new orders were issued, assault bolts had recalled their troops and departed from their prey. They also gotten some footage of what they were up against. As Teleek sent ships over to help the humans, it seems like they were having little to no problem dodging their torpedoes. It almost seemed like the insectoid ships were not even aiming at them. As soon as Teleek ships were able to engage, tactics had changed once again to a more swarm tactic instead from all the insectoid ships. There were only maybe 6 left out of the 18 ships that had engaged with. Bombers made short work of these. There were immobile.
Teleek watched and recalled the bombers that had spent their payloads. Order all ships to focus on their engines first, and get me a damage statistics for the ships in combat.
Reports are coming in that some had took torpedo hits that had caused the most damage. The remaining 6 insectoid ships were getting beaten up pretty bad, and they had started to move to disengage, but engaging their jump drives.
Disengage our ships, pull everyone back to normal formations, and try and re-establish comms with the humans, Teleek said to the signal officer.
As orders were made to disengage, ships moved back to formation, as well as a more detailed damage report was made out. The signal officer was instead being hailed by the humans, so he had put it back up on speakers. Iron Father Teleek, thank you for the assist. You had asked who you were fighting. It's a hive mind-like intelligent race called the Baskaras. They are a ruthless and aggressive race. For ourselves, we are called the Kaidayans. The few ships that remain of the Baskaras had jumped out of the combat zone at this time.
Good to know. May I assume... Goodness. May I ask the name of who I am speaking with? Teleek responded while giving orders for the damaged ships to fall back to the transports and for the rest of the fleet to move to the 2 Kaidayan ships.
The human over the comms responded, I am Eldern Whispertree, the captain of the Rampage of Triton Prime. Looks like some of your ships could use some repairs. We can make a deal if you're interested.
What kind of deal do you have in mind, Captain Whispertree? Teleek responded, telling the fleet to stand down to rotation V.
Captain looked over to the debris field of ships. Well, we can make use of these destroyed ships to get some parts and gear. Not to mention some of this can be broken down to materials to be used. He then thinks it's something that might be able to strike a bargain with the current problem is maybe gaining the system for themselves. Maybe you could help us with the Baskaras, and we can help you. Even though you are foreign to us, we can learn much from each other.
The salvage is yours to have, but we do need to rebuild and refuel our ships, preferably in a safe harbor. I would like to look over your ship schematics, Teleek asked.
In response, sounds like we have a deal then. Could we possibly wait here for a brief moment so that we can get some ships out here to collect the salvage? Our ship schematics? Could I inquire why? After about an hour of sitting tight, a few ships jumped into the area with humans IFF. They have seemed to be freighter-style ships by appearance. It only takes about an hour before all salvage is loaded into their cargo holds. While that was going on, coordinates were sent by a message to the navigator console. It was within the system. The space station near the continental planet. Captain Whisper Tree will meet you there at the station. As soon as the message was sent, their ships heading into jump drives to their station.
Tarek's response to Captain Whispertree's initial question was, "I want to see how your ships are built." Tarek replied with, and the fleet then moved to the station and docked, the supply ships moving around and the fleet forming a picket defense. The Fist of Iron docked with the station, and Tarek moved down to the docking bay where the connection was, his security team following behind.
With how the station was built, it was quite easy to dock to. The station was not big, but it is equipped to deal with small ship engagement for its size. You also see a bunch of civilian-type ships coming and going from the station. Some looks to be mining ships, bringing in supplies or resources, and also small freighter ships that you saw earlier doing the same thing. As Tarek and his security team gets to the docking bay, where they had to connect to, the door is open. The rather peculiar human. Yeah, wow, English. Sorry, folks. Peculiar human. Not one that Tarek has seen before. Likewise, the few individuals that stood before Tarek were also unsure how to make out what the armored giant to be.
Tarek proceeded to take his helmet off after it read that the air was safe to breathe and stepped into the station. The Terminators looming behind him with several squads of Marines forming behind in case of a fight. "You look different to the humans I normally speak with," Tarek says, looking down on the creatures in front of him. "Which of you is Captain Whispertree?"
Whispertree was at the front of the group with a few of his men behind him, also just in case of a fight. "That would be myself, and you are not what I had thought to be as well. Appearance is quite deceiving. Also to add, we are not quite human, but close enough. We are called Kayaden. You also notice that the hallways are big enough for yourself and the Firstborn Marine, but not the Primaris." Whispertree also mentions, I take you also saw what the Bhaskaras looked like then?" He asked. "You do recall, since some of your men had gotten video feed from on their visors."
"I did see what they looked like through video feeds from our helmets," Tarek replied, and ordered all Primaris to go about their business, as they could not fit a squad of Marines to stay stationed at the docking entrance. "You will forgive me if my guard doesn't leave me. They are a rather suspicious bunch and don't have much in the way of trust without being earned." Tarek looked at Whispertree and smiled slightly.
Whispertree looks over the rest of the personnel you have behind Tarek and notices that some are even a bit bigger than Tarek, it would seem. Whispertree nods as he gestures Tarek to follow. As you and Whispertree move about the station, it seems it is also a trade hub at the same time as a combat station and a construction hub, as well as using the resources and materials to make new ships, parts, and such. Can I ask you a question, Tarek? You had mentioned you were some sort of chapter. What meaning does that imply? Also, I mean no offense if you do not want to divulge, it's just I'm curious. And your tech also has some of the people on the station in awe.
It implies that we are supposed to be a limited number, but my clan breaks those rules as we are bigger than that limited amount. And we are used to being stared at, no matter where we go. I also wanted to see your ship's schematics because they looked interesting. And our tech is that which was built in forges in the fires of war. Teleek spoke calmly, looking around and following, making mental notes as he went.
That is most peculiar. As you and each guard detail keep moving about, you also come across what seems to be a research lab, as well as that seems to be working on tech development. You finally get to the command room where all the logistics and station matters are dealt with. In here is the command deck of the station. You will also meet with some of the other captains of some other fleets that also operate from here, like myself. The doors then opened, revealing the command deck with some rather clean and nice looking computer systems and monitors. Also at the same time, some heads had diverted towards your direction, with some people with some confusion. Whisper Tree had spoken up at that time. Everyone, this Iron Father Teleek. He is whom I have messaged in my report. He might be able to help with our problem. Maybe. That's if he agrees to it, that is.
And what problem would this be? I imagine it lays with the Boscaras. Teleek looks at Whisper Tree as the Terminators flow into the room, flanking the sides and standing behind the Iron Father. And I require some information myself as to a few matters, those which should be discussed with historians and with your technicians. Teleek looks around the room, his helmet having been clipped to his hip.
Chief in command calms everyone down, continues on with the current task. He then steps forward towards Derek. You need information. Maybe we can help you with that. And yes, this problem does entail to the Boscaras. They have been a problem for quite some time now, since they were able to get spaceborne. As he gestures you towards council. Oh, by the way, I'm the chief of command of the station. My name is Joldor Viatride. The console shows the system layout of all the planets and asteroids, and also each of the stations of whom they are affiliated to.
Teleek walks over to the map and looks at it. They're only positioned around this planet for space stations, and I'm to assume this station is their primary form of refit and rearm. Teleek asks Yoldor. Or Joldor, rather.
He pointed at the planet, the station they are located at, which is their home planet. It is the sulfur volcanic planet here. This is their main space station, and they have a mining station that you had seen before on the last planet, the gas giant. He then pauses for a brief moment to get his breath. We are here. We have a mining station on the brown dwarf planet, which is getting our fuel supply.
And what kind of solution are you looking for, Commander? Teleek asks, thinking about how to best solve the issue.
Well, the best solution would be they don't exist anymore, both in space or on the planet, where we can get some of the resources out of there. As he looks over to what ships he's got at his disposal, we can deal with the mining station, just not the space station.
And what would we get out of this arrangement? Tarek asks, looking around and visibly counting, the plasma weapons glowing softly in the Terminator's claws becoming more apparent.
At the same time, some of the guards notice the display of weaponry that seems to be getting powered up or being flexed. Well, we can offer trade agreements, also help you in finding any information that you seek to best of our power. Wow, on choice words. Unless you have something other ideas you might want to throw my way, I might be able to get approved.
Refit and repair for my vessels? You can keep your trade agreements to yourself for the time being, as we have all the supplies we need outside of our warp fuel, which we might be able to work out if we can process the giant gas planet's resources. And you can have either their space station and fleets wiped out, or their planet destroyed, but only one. I will not be judge, jury, and executioner of an entire species on the whims of someone who has a thorn in their side. And if I may ask, what is your religion? Tarek asks, staring the commander in the eye and motioning for his guard to lower their weapons. Keep in mind that if you do try to do anything rash, the men standing behind me and myself could wipe out this entire station by ourselves. I would rather not do that, as it would be a very large hassle and an even larger cleanup. Tarek looks at what seems to be the head of security, judging by the uniform, as he says this.
The chief nodded towards his head of security. He had gotten the signal to get his men to lower their weapons, for he had a grasp of the situation and not wanting a bloodbath in his station. Well, Tarek, the refit and repair of your vessels we can for sure help with. It might take some time to do all your ships, though. Station is not big enough to handle that large scale of a fleet. For the Boscaros, if I have to choose which for you to take on, I would ask for the station that we can handle with the planet side of things from there on. After what he spoke, he took a few breaths to get his breath back. For the religion, we have a few religion groups. I can't keep track of them all, for some come and go. For the major ones, one follows a god towards knowledge, another towards farming, fishing, and so on. So there is a few. It would be too prudent if I may know your religion, if you're more willing to share. If not, that is all fine as well. The chief also wanted to ask Tarek about his warp fuel thing he had mentioned, for maybe they could work something out. But that might be something out of his league. For what he is already questioning, Tarek, you had mentioned warp fuel. You're saying you can warp? What does that mean, if you do not mind me asking?
I will send a few of the more accepting priests to discuss religion, and their station will be handled, Tarek said calmly, having returned his focus to the commander. As far as the warp goes, the less you know, the better. But suffice it to say that think of your system jump, but on a much more massive of a scale. Tarek walks over to the squad of guardsmen that had been following, all wearing the Militarum Tempestus armor of the Shock Corps, and asks for the Vox receiver from the radioman. This is Iron Father Tarek to the Imperial Navy. Move to the first planet of the system and eliminate the space station located there. I leave the means to your discretion. Leave the ships that are unfit for combat here at Moore for repairs and resupply. Tarek handed the receiver back and looks down the hull at the approaching squads of Cadians, all wearing the same armor. Guardsmen, send me 4 of your most accepting priests to work with the newcomers. I want a platoon deployed with them as well. Tarek then puts his helmet on. Iron Father Tarek to the 16th. Send half our combat ships to assist the Imperial Navy in its endeavor to destroy the space station. No landings on the planet are to be made as of yet. Now, about those ship schematics. Teleek turned and looked at Captain Whispertree and Commander Viatride.
With the sudden orders coming from Teleek, the commands came like it was a part of him, or at least second nature from the Kaidine's viewpoint. Whispertree was already holding a few hand terminals in his hands and bringing them over to the console, where they saw the star system. He then uploaded there with a 3D model of their escort combat ships. So, this is our typical design as of now. We are working toward better designs and even bigger ones that can hold more. Also, you can select a point on the ship to get a more in-depth detail on the area and what its function is. These ships can hold 3 engines, 2 weapon systems, and 1 shield system. And also some armor plating for protection. The guardsmen had called 4 willing and able priests to work with the Kaidans to learn from each other. As you go over the screens of the ships and looking at some of the details, none of this looks like any that the Imperium man has seen or maybe come close of using. But you can tell they took some time in putting the design of these ships good use and finding out what is best uses were into its full effect. The weapons they have are kinetic long range and some laser style weapons. Also during this time, the Imperial Navy had formed a fleet within itself and left the ships that were unable to fight to ready their jump drives towards the first planet for the space station. The men and women on board feel something that they have not felt in quite some time. Something new. A thrill to fight an enemy they have never seen, to learn and strive better than ever before. With them, also half the Tempered Iron Clan was also with them. But one thing was made clear to all: not to land on the planet until further notice. Once all ships were aligned and ready, they made their jump to tackle the station.
Teleek looked over the schematics and looked through them, noting weak points and flaws in the design, but keeping all remarks to himself to brief the rest of the fleet over later. His guards seemed to relax as they did the shock troops that had his guards seemed to relax, as did the shock troopers that had arrived as well. Imperial Guard squad patrolling and looking through the general areas, weapons shouldered. Several quartermasters had arrived and were doing inventory lists and finding the supplies for refit and repairs. It seemed, for all intents and purposes, that the Imperial forces had arrived and were mingling, all while most were notating key points for fighting and weapons being used by security details, most writing things down in code. Your ships seem to be very robust. I have a question about the earlier fight, though. The Boscaras seemed to fire torpedoes at your ships, and they were missing by a very large margin, Teleek asked aloud to the room.
Whispertree had looked over and pointed out a specific tech that maybe Teleek had missed or passed it by. It's this, a special countermeasure system. It allows us to dodge with ease and kind of scramble the foe's sensors a bit, giving us an edge in combat against some weapon systems. Meanwhile, a few fleets from the Kaidans were now forming up to go and take on the mining station and what few ships that may be there. As well near the station of the Boscaras, the Imperial fleet had jumped in at a distance to see what their engagement rate might be. Ships were in high alert and combat ready for their next fight.
Can I get the specs on that system? We don't have a system like that will handle sensors. Teleek looks over everything, asking in detail what certain systems are, making sure not to ask too much to be suspicious. Messages popped onto his helmet, helmet screen and were linked to the data slate he had on him, all having been written in Imperial code from military forces and Low Gothic from quartermasters. Teleek looked over at a display that had the Imperial Navy's fight pulled up, looking to see if they were recording the fight.
Whisper Tree looked over at the chief, and he had nodded. So Whisper Tree had uploaded the data onto a small data slate and handed it over to Teleek. I do hope this might help. If you need help, we will be more than willing to help you with getting it set up on some of your ships, as Whisper Tree mentioned. Elsewhere, the Imperial fleet was recording the fight. The ship's torpedo tubes had opened up onto the station, but only a small handful had reached the station where the defenses were actually set up nicely. The Buscars did not move to engage, but they kept a defense formation near the station. More ships were coming from the planet into space, from the volcanic planet that were the Buscars' designs. There are well over 30 ships now and waiting to see what their foe was waiting for.
And where are your historians, Whisper Tree? Teleek asks, having found a chair to sit down in, or rather, made one out of some spare metal. The honor guard placing themselves around the room and the shock troops manning the door, not knowing what else to do until dismissed. As well as I'd like you to not destroy the mining platform. It may be of some use later.
As Teleek had asked about the historians, they were already in motion to move to the command bridge. They should be here shortly, Teleek. I believe you want a private room to discuss with them. We can go deal with. We can go deal. We can. We can deal. Hang on, sorry. Words don't line up properly.
No, they don't.
We can go with that plan. Maybe we both can learn a bit more from the Buscars and their tech if we took it in one piece. Meanwhile, the fighting over the Buscar station, the Imperial fleet let loose another torpedo volley, but with some of their fighters and bombers to fly with the warheads, while the ships fly ever closer to the target to get their reaction. Buscars seem to move to intercept the torpedoes and spacecraft coming out of their station. They in turn closed the gap to launch their torpedoes at the Navy. The station also fires weapons at the Navy. Everything is being engaged while the station is not in immediate danger, but it's also taking fire from three sides, which is making it hard to defend.
Yes, I would like to speak with them privately. I imagine there's a room nearby, or should I take them aboard my ship? Teleek asks, having been replying to various messages and watching the fight, turning off the holo display before standing up and making ready to leave. Guardsmen, return the holo display to my ship and have the crew watch. Make sure they are notating improvements that can be made. The shock troops moved in and took the holo display back to the Fist of Iron, a few squads coming to assist in moving and guarding.
Yes, Teleek, we do have a room close by you can use to speak with historians. As the chief of command had spoken, as the battle rages on, some of the spacecraft do get shot down, but not without any effort in taking down a few of their escort ships being destroyed. Ships are now getting to combat range with its closer range weapons. The Navy ships' lances started opening up, hit shields at first, but with some of the effort, they go down with ease as macro weapons tear through them, taking no effort. The Buscars are not doing so well, but are also putting a little dent into things. They have formed up into a assault pattern, targeting one ship at a time. They had crippled at least 4 ships doing so, but losing 3/4 of theirs. In the process, the station was now taking on some of the heavy firepower, and parts and pieces were being blown apart.
Teleek walked to the door to await the historians, and his guard followed. the Terminator's heavy footsteps shaking the ground slightly as they walk, being noticeable now due to the calm air that had developed.
Historians had arrived within a few minutes, and were gestured towards Tarek and the room that was saved for them. Historians, this is Tarek. He would like some info on some of our history. Do your best to help him in any way you can. Meanwhile, the battle at the Pescara station is going well, but one of the Navy ships was completely disabled. Had no engine power or weapon system that could be used. They still had their life support systems running on backup power, but it would only last out for so long before that went dark. Also, the station is taking on more damage as the remaining ships were destroyed, and it was only a matter of time before the station would blow.
Tarek walks with the historians over to the side room, walking in as most of the guard posted at the door with only a few accompanying Tarek inside. Tarek sat down at the table and greeted the historians. I am Iron Father Tarek of the 16th Clan Company of the Iron Hands chapter of Adeptus Astartes. I am looking for an old friend of mine and wanted to find out if he had visited this system a long time ago.
The historians all sat at the same table as Tarek, with their records of history on data slate. My name is none Vendud. Few Punkruft. Who might be this friend of yours, if you don't mind me asking? The one that sits across from Tarek had opened up. Also, if you have a description of this person, that would also help us narrow things down. The battle is near its end, as a single torpedo hits the center mass of the station, hitting its reactor supply, causing it to explode from within. The station tears itself apart from explosions as parts and decks are shot out into space, causing a debris field where it once was positioned. Parts of damages were coming in, and things were quiet. One of the ships that was stationed close to the planet was getting some odd readings, something that was familiar, but also seems out of place. Scans had showed that there are some high tombs located on the surface.
His name is Iskar Valkush of the Salamanders chapter of Adeptus Astartes. His description from last I saw of him was ebony skin with a pair of red eyes, wearing armor in similar size to mine, but with a Drakenhof coloration to it. He wields a thunder hammer and a hand flamer. His left pauldron has a volcanic look to it as well. Tarek speaks calmly, thinking for a moment. He would have arrived sometime in the past 200 years or so.
With a description of the said person that Tarek is looking for, they each had looked into the data for any info on said name or time frame. Each had looked at each other's in hopes that maybe someone had found it, and a few had looked over with their history again to see if they had only missed it. Is there any other info that you might be able to share? We're having a few problems finding it, as Nun Bandud asked, with hopes of trying to find out more if there is any info within their data. Over the sulfur volcanic planet now, without the station, something was amiss. The crew of the ship, the crews of the ships that were stationed, any scans that had picked up on the high tombs, the population was either scarce or none to be showing up on the scans for any life signs of the Vascaras.
One of the Terminators slid a data slate onto the table for Tarek to review. Tarek simply sighed and got up. Thank you for your assistance. He would have been hard to miss, and even harder to kill. I have a problem that needs my personal attention. Follow if you wish to do more review of your history, or you can give your history to my crew and we can sleep through it. It is up to you. Tarek takes his helmet off his hip and slides it on, stepping out into the hallway as he walks back to his ship, the smell of iron filling the station as a small rage entered Tarek's mind.
One of the historians asked, would it be possible for myself to maybe join you? I can record, study, and learn. Maybe help you in finding your friend. The Navy fleet keeps their current position, but keeps doing regular scan sweeps to see if they can get any readings on the surface. The men and women on board the ships waiting for any orders, knowing that there might be something more worse on the surface other than the Boscaras. They all have an inclined feeling on what that might be down there, but it could be also a ruse. Some of the personnel were getting troops ready to get onto the surface ahead of time and getting suited up for planet side, just in case the order was given.
Follow. You may bear witness. Tarek boards his ship and orders the 15th Tactical Squad to act as the guide for the historian. Tarek breaks the seal after the docking procedures and orders the frigates and destroyers to stay and guard the supply ships, and orders the rest of the 16th to make ready for war. The troop transports following close behind as ships start to ready themselves for combat. This is Iron Father Tarek to all ships. Maintain distance from planet and prepare for orbital landing. May the Emperor's light guide us as we confirm the readings. Iron Father Tarek, out. Tarek then looks over the readings as members of the initial battles of Badab get an old itch. Confirm the readings against those of the Necrons. Now! Tarek orders sternly as the rest of the fleet jumps. Upon arrival, he orders a pair of Dauntless light cruisers to escort the Dictator-class cruiser back to port for major repair and watches over the fleet preparations being made. Tarek looks over the readings again to be sure of the report.
The historian that had asked to join followed and was given permission from the chief to go with. The historian, being new and seeing the ship being so huge on the inside and massive, he had felt so insignificant in comparison. He was guided to a room with some of the historians from Tarek's ship, and that had conversed for quite some time. As Tarek moved to his clan to the planet and getting some of the ships back to undergo repairs, the readings were true. They were of the same origin as he had feared. The only question now, is it an old foe from his past, or some new foe that resembles them from the past? On the surface in the northern hemisphere, Tarek was getting reports of orbital scans that can't get a lock on a sector of smoldering ruins. It seems like there is something there that does not want to be found or located.
This is Iron Father Tarek to all members of the 16th. Prepare for orbital drop and planet assault. Make all preparations with the calmness and clarity as we always have. Individual orders and sections will be distributed shortly. May the blessings of the Omnissiah and the watchful eye of the God Emperor both guide and protect us. Make ready to fight the Necrons. Tarek proceeded to pull up an image of the map and assign different companies to different sectors, claiming the northern hemisphere as the primary target, and as such put his most experienced troops to be deployed to the area where the anomaly was. He knew he didn't have the numbers to take the planet, and as such used the Imperial Guard to form an outer ring of security both looking in and out, with a ring of Marines closer. Teleek did not know what laid in wait, but would decide to be ready for anything. Move the fleet's best orbital bombardment ships up to provide direct fire support if deemed necessary by those on the ground. Captain, you have the helm. I will be going planet-side.
Men and women across all ships were geared and ready for action, with a foe for most which is new to them, and for others, like the Marines, it's an old foe they have fought long ago. Some have remembered facing them like it was only months ago when they had fought them. Ships were prepping launch bays, fighter craft, drop ships, and some with drop pods all ready to launch. They all waited for the main command to launch their craft and ships. The captain in charge of the ship messaged Teleek. All ships are awaiting the final call to launch their assault plans.
Teleek boarded a Thunderhawk with a pair of Terminators in tow and 2 squads of tactical Marines. This is Teleek to all Imperial forces. Commence operation.
All ships have given the green light to launch all strike craft and drop ships. All drop pods were set up with assault troops configuration, with some recon style troops also to get an overview of the area before the main force gets to landfall. Drop pods were the first to make landfall, and troops were moving to their dedicated areas of operation. Scouts were also in position. One group of scouts based troops got a closer eye on the area, and their reports that was relayed up the chain of command. A series of disruptive nodes were preventing signal returns back to the ships above. The area seemed to have some sort of jamming frequency to block comms to ships, and also disrupting comms to some of the forces based on the terrain. The terrain is a rocky dune area they were heading into, and so it made it even harder to track movement or find their targets, especially with the signal also adding to the effect.
Deploy all troops. I want scouts and outriders to move in unison to track this creature down. Tactical squads and the main assault teams will move to destroy the signal jammers. It's time for a hunt. Tell all Imperial Guard forces to contain this area and to not anyone, or anything for that matter, into the zone. They are free to call for Adeptus Astartes support and orbital support if needed. Teleek commanded, looking over the terrain as he awaits to make planetfall.
Troops were moving into the area, but with signals being a problem and terrain also hindering comms for some, it made it somewhat difficult, but also presented a challenge that some actually looked forward to take on. Not too much longer as troops were moving, they were getting engaged with Necron forces on the ground, but it almost seemed like they were being teleported into random areas to throw off the Imperial forces. This foe was no different than others before, other than they had an amethyst color scheme about them. The troops that were heading for the signal jammers could not push in, but they were being pushed back. Also, a group of scouts had located what looked to be an overlord on the field moving towards the signal jammers. He was on foot. They didn't get a clear sight on him, but he had 3 other Necrons with him as well.
Put me down near where the Lord was located. Tell all forces to not be too eager to fight their foe. Fight with the old logic behind you, and you will win. Teleek spoke to the pilot as well as to all commanders who could hear him over the voxnets.
Commanders started getting more organized and picking their fights now where they had the advantage. It has been some time since they had fought this style foe, but it's now coming back to them as they fight. But they do keep coming back to life for more punishment, which does not help. Teleek's Thunderhawk was about to make landfall, but the left side of the ship got hit by something big and made the ship to lose control of its left wing. and engine putting into a spiral. Everyone that was not strapped in was being flung around on the inside of this Thunderhawk. The Thunderhawk was not going to land so close to the jammer, but it had crossed so close to it. The Lord saw the ship go down near the site, and he was heading to, and was now running at a pace to get there before the invaders got to it first. There was some static coming into the comms from the ships above, not getting through to Teleek, which was proving troublesome, for he knew nothing was going to help above.
Teleek woke up from having been jolted around. He called out to his brothers, but none responded immediately. He unstrapped himself and fell forward due to the positioning of the craft, and tried to raise the pilot, but was unable to do so. In the process of his moving about, one of his Terminators awoke and called out, Teleek climbing over and assisting him up. They tried to check the vital signs, but found 16 of the tactical Marines dead, pilot dead, and the rest alive. Of those alive, the other Terminator guard was severely wounded and unable to do much as well as one of the tactical Marines. Another was minorly wounded but could still hold his bolter and was put on guard, and the other two started to do Medicia on the two severely injured battle brothers. Teleek opened the ramp and told the Marines to stay put and hold this position. While doing so, they were to try and make contact for rescue, while Teleek and his guard were to take out the jammer that was closest.
While trying to call on the comms to get any rescue set up for the fallen and injured brothers, all that they could hear was static. Being so close to the jammers, it was too strong and made it impossible to contact anyone else. The brother next to him could hear him on the comms and saw him goes with the few still back at the crash site, but that was it. Teleek would have to do some of the jammers first before trying to contact anyone again. The battle was fast and quick. In about 10 minutes or so fighting over an area where the jammers had been deployed by the Necron forces, they have managed to either destroy them or disable them. Teleek and his one Terminator had returned back to the downed Thunderhawk, where the surviving Marines were holding up and awaiting rescue. While Teleek was fighting, one of the Marines had set up a few scanner arrays nearby the Thunderhawk to get comms with everyone, and data transferred around to each other of the sections.
The Auspix array picked up movement from the Necron forces nearby, which alerted Teleek to those near the Thunderhawk to their plan to take the comms relay. The injured were stable enough to hold their own, and as such, Teleek took his Terminator guard and one of the Marines with him to defend the relays. Both forces met at the relay points, and there was a fierce exchange of bolter fire from the Marine and the Necrons in front of him, as the Terminator thundered off to handle 3 more. Well, there's a fierce exchange of bolter and Gauss Flayer rifle. Teleek stayed at the primary relay in order to defend it, as he and his forces were stretched to the limits they can maintain. Even though the fighting was fierce, the Necrons would ultimately break the relay system. Teleek and his men fell back in order to have a better advantage in the next fight. During the battle, a number of Valkyries from the Imperial Guard had arrived, as well as a Storm Eagle. The Storm Eagle had been carrying a pair of apothecaries as well as a squad of Devastator Marines, with a few tactical Marines as escort. Teleek took charge of the situation and ordered his troops to unload the wounded and for the bodies and armor to be loaded into the Valkyries. As this happened, a scout squad arrived and informed Teleek of the movements of the Necrons, stating that they were moving towards the crash site. Teleek ordered one of the scouts to lead him to the Necrons and grabbed 2 more tactical Marines and one of the Devastators in order to help slow the Necrons down. Tarek's small strike team then moved into a good defensible location in order to meet the Necrons, waiting for the chance to return the favor of the most recent defeat.
After the battle for the Scanner race, Tarek had pulled back all of the Necrons' lord was corrupting the race to get invoked. At the same time, Tarek also got relief forces to come in and aid him in the area. After an hour from his last fight with the Necrons, it's been unnaturally quiet in the area until the scouts came back with some info that the Necron lord was moving again. But this time he was heading for the crash site, so Tarek had decided to move to a position to either defend or assault the Necrons at a landscape that should prove a quite staging spot to push the Necron forces back by his forces. Time to get the wounded off the planet or to a forward operating base. After the battle, while laying in wait, the enemy forces to come to where Tarek had his force waiting. The Lord was no longer a lord, but an overlord commanding over all the forces in the area now. The fight was intense, and it had forced the Necrons to withdraw from the area. But there was a large-scale ordinance coming in from the Necron side to help scatter the enemy and help the overlord to even out the playing field. But it did not do too much to help. But it did scatter both forces in such a way that both groups were now split off and are now trying to regroup in the center to push their enemy out of the area.
And that is where the story ends for the time being, until we write the rest of the battle report from this most recent fight. Which, if you would like to watch, is currently at youtube.com/panzerlight42. I think. It should be uploaded. So, I will end this stream in order to help signify where the end of the story thus far is and where the beginning of the rules are.
Yeah, it's already like 2 a.m.
Yeah, which if you don't want to do, we can skip, because it took about 2 hours to do the fucking story thus far, which is
Freaking awesome.
It is awesome.
Oh, geez, voice getting pretty racked up there.
Yes, it was. Alright, so I will end the stream. Thank you all for listening. We will either do a rules breakdown here in just a moment, or we will do it not next week, but the week after next. So, I thank you all for listening, and I bid you all a farewell.